Hello, New York.
Hello, Tom.
That's better. Okay. Okay. My name's Tom. I run the Fire Eagle project for Yahoo, and I will be your host for this afternoon for a panel primarily focused on location. So that's location of people, location of things, and all the sort of data and computing things that can happen around that kind of stuff. The goal of this panel, from my perspective, there's a couple of goals. One of them is to show you cool shit. One of them is to make you think about some of the possibilities and some of the problems that you'll come up against if you're building stuff. And it's to introduce you to a bunch of things that people are working out there in the wild, and a bunch of very cool people who have explored this area and have sort of particular insights into it. What I'm particularly hoping is at the end of this session, you guys will go away, some of you will go away and think about building something involving location and showing it off tomorrow afternoon. So that's really my focus, is that we collectively kind of, spirit fingers, jazz hands in your direction sufficiently that you will get terribly excited and go away and make things. So it's nice, easy, simple remit. And ideally, we'd like you to make things involving some of the technologies that are on display before you today in all their glory. So I'm really proud, as a result, to be able to introduce you to some of the people doing some of the most interesting work in this area on the internet. And when I introduce them to you, I want to hear some clapping and some whooping. So first up, the Map Meister and Geolord of Flickr, a service with tens of millions of geotagged photos. Some of the most exciting geo work on the planet today. I give you Aaron Cope.
Hi, my name is Aaron.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, it works. You don't have to say anything.
Environment where people are used to, like, we spent a lot of time with Dodgeball answering the why would anyone ever want to do this question. And we'd probably be doing the same thing with Foursquare if Twitter didn't already answer that question. It's like, well, like, you contribute to Twitter because you do get some kind of value out of it. Like, there's some value in your friends knowing what you had for lunch and knowing where you are and just having a general sense of presence and awareness. And I think we benefit from all those things.
Cool. If you haven't used Foursquare at all, I would recommend it. It's quite good fun. You're welcome. And while we're here, just quickly, this is outside in. You can find out news about your local area if you wanted to. And in terms of, I'm not going to click on things just in case the thing seizes up again. And this is DIYcity, which obviously has a whole bunch. Is there anything you want to talk about while you can see it, John, quickly?
No.
Okay, cool. That whole thing. Okay, so and just quickly to give you, assuming this actually works, I mean, how many people here know what Fire Eagle is? About half of you. It's just a way, basically, you kind of capture your location, and yes, Seth, lead engineer on the project, I'm aware that you know. Anyway. It's a way for you to share your location with lots of services. So you can update in one place from lots of different applications and say how much you want to share with lots of other services. So at some point, Dodgeball will be supporting, not Dodgeball, Foursquare will be supporting.
I wrote it down. Like, I'm embarrassed that we don't support it.
Yeah, I'm embarrassed.
I know. I'm an awful friend.
So this is Fire Eagle, and this is some of the apps you can build on. Okay, so with all that in mind, everyone's a little bit up. I think we're all feeling loose. Done our yoga. Okay, so let's just go into some slightly more. No, actually, this is a question John suggested. It was before we get into what's really exciting about the sort of geolocative space. I think maybe it would be good to start off with what's extraordinarily boring, because we've all talked about these things a number of times. Lots of you have heard stuff about geo before, and there are some subjects that sort of grind around that don't really progress and don't really get very far. So, I mean, you guys, like, starting with John, it was your idea. What do you think is really boring?
Well, I should say that I feel like a year ago or 2 years ago was a really boring time to be doing local panels. And I was doing them all over the place because local was really about, like, real estate sites and such like that were interesting but not then blow your socks off. And I feel like now is a really exciting time to be doing local panels. Because there's Foursquare, because there's Where on Earth ID and DIYcity, people are hacking things in their cities and just sort of whatnot. So that's my answer.
Right, so no more real estate. Death to real estate.
That's gone away.
Aaron, anything you find particularly dull?
Yeah, I'm actually really bored with augmented reality.
Already?
Yeah, already.
Everyone here know what augmented reality is? Anyone here not know what augmented reality is?
I mean, that's a byproduct of something I talk about when I talk about sort of this. It's great that we're collecting all of this data, but basically all we're doing is building a mirror world and that's not really very interesting, right? Like, the only thing the only good thing I've seen for AR, augmented reality, are arrows. Like, that's the only useful application I've seen. Maybe there's something else.
Do you want to be a little clear about what you mean there?
I just mean directions for something. Like, you're just looking for something and having a big arrow in front of you. It's the simplest interface. It doesn't try to be cute. It doesn't try to be, it doesn't try to make the reality around you better. Like, I don't need that.
Right. Anyone here want to contest Aaron on this one? Fight back.
I'd like the world to be better.
You'd like the world to be better, okay.
But I mean, I've joked to people that I'm going to make an AR app that simply displays all of the OpenStreetMap tags, all of them, within eyeshot, and basically it will just be red dot fever all over again.
It would just be a screen full of tags saying horse equals yes, right?
So,
yeah, okay. Horse equals yes being one of Aaron's pet issues with the world at the moment.
that's
Okay,
another
Dennis.
story.
Yeah, Dennis.
Yeah, so like with the dodgeball stuff, I think we were like one of the first people to do the whole like check-in model. And like you check in and you have the dots in the map and you know where all your friends are. And that was like a big idea back in like 2004 when we were doing it. And I think up until, even just a couple months ago, like that was the end game. It's like you just know where your friends are all the time, and it's like it's just not that interesting anymore. So the interesting thing, it's like so what? Like I know where everyone is, but like make something interesting happen on top of that. Like find the 3 closest friends and then set something up for us to do. Based upon our schedules and our availability and the things that we said we wanted to do and the things that like the missed opportunities that we've had to connect with one another. And it's like they can be personal things like recommend a place for me to go, within a couple blocks I've never been to before, none of my other friends have been to before, or it could be, like here, let's just take a look of all the dots, that happen to be in this room right now, and try to make a connection between 1 or 2 people that I should meet because they're the most relevant people to the problems that I'm having or the things I want to talk about, that type of stuff.
Just to kind of pick up on that, I think maybe part of what's making location so exciting to me right now is that the web is becoming more real time, and so like knowing where your friend was 2 weeks ago isn't that exciting.
Sure.
But knowing where your friend is right now is pretty exciting.
Also, you get a lot more context. Like there's a lot more like real-time info, just out in Twitter, and you can mine all that stuff and map it to that long, and you have a good idea of like the type of stuff that people are talking about here and the ability to make those connections.
Right. So information is just way more indexed and metaed than it used to be.
It's not structured, but it's like you can comb through it.
Right.
I just heard this noise and I thought Cal's taking the piss out of me by making gurgling noises. It actually is a 2-year-old. I'm more. Okay. No, I mean, I think that's actually really interesting. I'm a similar place. I mean, the stuff we did, this stuff with Fire Eagle, we built. We didn't want friend finding to be the core part of Fire Eagle. We wanted the ability to take your location and splice it together with everything else to be the important bit. But we sort of found that early on, it was really hard to explain to people what we were trying to do, and so we built like a friend finding app to go like, okay, well that seems to be what you want. This seems to be like your first kind of point of call, the easiest thing to explain to people. And actually, we found people on the whole, some of the other stuff they get much more excited about. They get much more excited about like keeping the paths of where they've been when they've been on holiday, or going to a site and it reacting to them in some way, or being alerted by something, than they do actually about the social stuff. So I kind of agree with you. I think I find like some of the social stuff to be like Latitude, I think, is an example of something that's just concentrated kind of clumsily on the social stuff.
Yeah.
And really, hasn't offered that much beyond that yet.
It could be that like we're so knee deep in this world that like we're clamoring for new stuff because we've been, people have been doing the same stuff since 2004. But one thing is good to be said about Latitude, like it introduces the masses to the fact that like, whoa, my phone can track me and it knows where I am. Like that's, for my mom and my dad, like that's like a big thing. And like Google's, doing all the heavy lifting in terms of teaching people that devices can do that and services can do that. And it's like up to us, I guess it's up to us to build like the stuff on top of that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I think history is, like, it's one thing to do it in real time, and that's definitely interesting, but then to try and figure out how to create a narrative for all of that historical information is getting really difficult because there's just so much stuff.
Right.
And how do you convey the richness of a place to someone without just sort of pointing a fire hose at them literally and just spraying them with geodata? We did a project earlier in the year called Nearby, which was simply, at the core, it was just a radial query, right? It would show me photos that were taken nearby this one. And some of the discussions we had internally were, well, isn't that just dots on a map? And the answer is no. I mean, like, what does it tell you that there are a lot of geotagged photos in Times Square? I mean, you take that for granted. Any city is just going to be full of dots now. And so we tried to use simply the relationship of the photos to one another to build that narrative, and to very deliberately use, the spaces between the photos in the same way that comic book artists use the gutter in a comic book to, allow a tiny mental bridge for users to connect the images. It's not clear that it was ultimately successful, but it was at least a start.
I'm trying to get that up now by finding one of my pictures, which is the geotag, but none of them bloody have been. Sorry. That's annoying. Yeah, I mean, so talking about some of the stuff that's kind of boring, some of the stuff that we get stuck with, and actually, one of those is going to be privacy, and I'm going to bring that up again in a minute, because obviously, when we're starting to talk about individuals or objects being marked or tagged, obviously, issues of privacy and data governance and all this kind of stuff are a really big deal. But actually, so many times this debate gets, this kind of conversation gets stuck on that stuff. And like my position has generally been that as technologists, our goal is to find the new possibilities out there, observe what things could go wrong with them, and then try and maximize the power of the possibilities while mitigating as many of the risks and dangers as possible, so we can find any project that people actually want to use. So I think we will talk a bit about privacy and stuff in a minute. But so I just want to make sure anyone in the audience who's sitting there going, if only they just talk about privacy, we will get to that. I swear to God. And that would be an appropriate picture, I think, to find out how that's geotagged. Anyone here know what the Folsom Street Fair is? It's not loading. Okay, it'll probably turn up in a minute, and if it does, I apologise if it upsets you. Okay, but so here we go. Yeah, so we've talked a bit about some of the boring things. What is it about like the locative stuff at the moment, like knowing where people are, knowing what objects are, connecting the two in some kind of way? It's a very reasonable picture. These people, it's perfectly. We live in San Francisco. What can I say? Just on the way to buy some cookies. Anyway, it's not a euphemism. Okay, let's talk a bit about some of the interesting stuff. Like, what are the things that excite you in this area at the moment? What kind of possibilities do you see that haven't really been realized yet? Anyone want to start?
Yeah, so it's, like a lot of the location queries that we think about, it's like, how do you hook people up with the people that they want to meet, not the people they want to avoid, and the places that they want to go, and like new experiences that they should have that are kind of nearby. And a lot of that stuff it's contextual, right? So it's based upon, the things that you've done in the past, and maybe the things that you've blogged about or tweeted about. It's based on, some of the contextual cues that you can get from the phone, like, is the phone relatively standing still, or have you been walking around a lot? Like, is it breakfast, lunch, or dinner time? And it's like, we've been playing around in this locative space for a while. Oh, sorry. We're getting there. I swear to God, we're going to fix it. We're going to fix it. I've been playing around with the locative stuff for a while, and it's like we just haven't had the ability to do the contextual stuff. And the stuff that Twitter offers through the API, and now with the geolocative API, it's just like there's very, very rich contextual information there, and it's like the first time that a lot of us get to play with like a much richer data set to try to take a stab at doing some of those things.
Dennis, you're upsetting the children.
Yeah, I know.
You're going to have to stop talking. I'm so sorry.
I know, the website crashes all the time. I'm crying too on the inside.
Aaron.
I mean, as much as I complain about the mirror world and the flattening, I am actually genuinely excited about the ability to collect as much data as we have. One of the really lovely stories I heard about the OpenStreetMap project is that one of the benefits of the project has been simply by collecting all of this data, the community has started to build tools around it to manage it. And out of that, now there's this massive resource that anyone can use to do geo stuff. And I think you can sort of apply that across the board. I mean, the notes I had for us were, that's how we did the alpha shapes. We had the data available in the Where on Earth IDs. We were able to assign unique identifiers to places.
Have people seen this, by the way? This is the alpha shapes team. Do you want to give a 10-second overview of how it works?
Yeah, the 10-second overview is every photo is sorted into a hierarchy of up to 6 places. Each one of them has a unique ID. And then what we did was we sorted all of those IDs into buckets and simply dropped them on the map, so to speak. And we thought maybe we could get something that was a little more robust than just a bounding box, because that's what we were working with. And we were floored. I mean, this is coming from nothing but geotagged photos.
So there's normal members of the public describing their photos with in geotagging it, allowing you to say, this is the shape of America, this is the shape of Europe.
And you get some really lovely sort of oddball things, like there's a lot of water masses. That you see Texas sticks out into the water. And what that probably is people fishing, people boating. And so that starts to beg the question of, what is place? We typically think of water as the absence of place, except every major metropolitan area is defined by the water around it. You think of the rivers in London or Paris, you think of the river here. In San Francisco, people in Oakland and San Francisco may hate one another, but they all love the bay.
So I mean, I think we'll come back to some of this stuff in a bit, because it's going to be like how you work with people to get data, which obviously you guys have been doing as well with Foursquare.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, this means, the Texas image, that means that someone's physically typed in Texas to tag that photo, or it's in the description or the title, or?
No, it means they've gone to the map and dropped it there.
And just dropped it in Texas?
Yeah, so very briefly, the way that we assign a starting where on Earth ID is to do something called reverse geocoding, which is this problem of the only people that think of the world as points are robots. But we're not going to say that to people. Your photo was taken in 122.37. Like, why bother? So we go through this process of trying to figure out where that place is. So we start with the neighborhood. If we can't figure out the neighborhood, then we try to figure out the city. If we can't figure out the city, we try to figure out the state. So probably what's happened there is there's not too many neighborhoods out in the water.
Yeah.
But it fell within, it was close enough to Texas that the robot squirrels that we use were like, it's probably Texas.
Yeah, okay.
Robot squirrels.
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. That's how Flickr works. Finally, we know. Yeah, I mean, I think this is kind of interesting, as I said, because we're going to talk a bit later about the kind of resources that are out there for people to build things with, and and also how you work with audiences to start creating some of that data. And of course, the other thing which Flickr did in this one is corrections, like when people, when they guess and say, this is in, Manhattan, and you're like, that's not Manhattan, or like an area of Manhattan, you can actually change that to another name, and then they can use that for these shapes.
Yeah, that was an important part of doing the shape files. I mean, our experience has been there's no better way to pick a fight with someone than to tell them that they're in a neighborhood that's,
That's adjacent, but not quite as nice as the one they're actually in.
So, we had to allow for corrections before we did this, because otherwise it would have just been a feedback loop.
So, John, like things that are exciting you,
I was just going to say robo squirrels, actually. That was my.
going back to Folsom Street Fair again.
I think what's really exciting about local right now is, like we were touching on, the ability to get more and more real-time data coupled with the phone knowing exactly where you are. And when you put those two things together, you get this really totally game-changing situation where if people are gathering that information and sending it to the people who care, then you can pretty much just be piping data from the city to the people who can use it in real time, and they can use that to make more intelligent decisions about their maneuvers through the city, whether it's finding your friends, or whether it's knowing there's a traffic jam up ahead of you, or whether it's knowing that, whatever, there's a flu outbreak on the Upper West Side or something. It just doesn't end to me. Like, there's the data, the city is just constantly throwing off data. It's like this gigantic data cloud, and we can just keep harnessing it. As long as there's a geolocation to it, we can start piping it to the people who care about it. Geo plus a few other attributes, and it just seems like there's no end to what we can do with that.
Right.
Yeah. Can I just?
Yeah, go on ahead.
I mean, again, it's more just data. It is the availability, and it's the ability to infer a certain sort of context about stuff that you might not be able to otherwise. We've been doing a lot of work with machine tags, which are a whole other conversation. But basically, it means that if someone adds, say a Foursquare tag, we can go and get the venue information for that place. And the thing that's, one, we can just get coordinates, and that's interesting. But the other thing we can start to do is more or less infer whether something was taken indoors or outdoors.
Right.
And that starts to get really interesting.
Okay, so I mean, I'm just going to run into this with a little bit of my own stuff on this one, because I mean, one of the reasons we did Fire Eagle was because we thought that if you could get that tiny atom of where someone was, and you could combine that with pretty much everything else on the internet, and that might be interesting. So, for example, you could say, whenever I send an email, mark where I sent it from. Whenever I receive an email, mark where I received it from, and then being able to do things like, I want to see, emails, that I, just literally, I want to see emails I sent from Paris, or like for those of us who go to Paris a lot. But or like in the social context, it's where are my friends, how do I find them, when you're creating photos and posting them, it's like let's mark this as a place at a particular time, and Twitter would be an obvious example. If the geolocation API they're working on at the moment, it makes it, the principal uses presumably are able to do searches like, I'd like to see what people are talking about, how people feel about Barack Obama in San Francisco versus New York and be able to kind of filter all of that material in real time. It's kind of cool. So that's why we built Fire Eagle, and that's why that stuff, that little atom plus the internet, I think is why I'm excited by this area. So I promised we'd do it, so let's talk a bit about privacy and data. For me, obviously, when we did Fire Eagle, it was one of the biggest questions for us, making sure that people felt they had control and could choose how much to share and all that kind of stuff and delete that data. But I mean, it's still an area that makes people tense, and I think we have to have an understanding of whether or not we're able to address those concerns, and if so, how we convince people that actually they do have control and it is safe and comfortable for them. What kind of stuff have you guys come up against in this area? What kind of thoughts do you have here, if any?
I mean, I don't know. We launched an app last year called DIYcity, where we were just monitoring people talking about different diseases in cities on Twitter. So if a lot of people were talking about flu in New York that day, we assumed that the flu quotient was high, or fever or whatever. And when we first started doing it, we were just pulling up their whole profile, a big picture of them with their quotes. And oh my God, I was barfing, I have the flu. And it got pretty big, it was Wall Street Journal ran an article, and a whole bunch of people ran articles, CNET, and people started complaining that they were, their privacy was being, I don't think that's actually
Not you? Okay, well, let's give it.
No, that is, maybe.
Oh, okay, well then I will.
No, that's not. But I just think I think the app is down now.
Oh, okay, well.
Yeah, there you go.
Pasadena and
See,
Flushing.
it's all flat because the engine needs to be restarted. But anyway, I mean, my feeling is a little bit in that context that everybody's living in the glass box, and they should know that. I mean, I guess we're kind of pulling it out of context a little bit and highlighting it. So we actually took away we anonymized it considerably. But I felt like.
Yeah, I don't agree that everyone's living in a glass box.
Microphone. Thank you.
I don't agree that everyone's living in a glass box, and I don't think that that's a good default position.
Let me add to that.
Okay.
I think that's true on Flickr. I think that if you're on Twitter, you're broadcasting. That's a broadcast medium, and so just like blogging, and so that can be taken and repackaged. So I think it's very much depends on the context of the site that you're dealing with. Facebook, I think you're not a glass box clearly, but
well, you're not broadcasting. I mean, yeah. Although when we started, we were definitely sort of a broadcast mechanism. Maybe it's evolved into something else, but I think that the privacy and geo thing is important. It's also a real nuisance. And we've run into some problems with it as the iPhone has come along, as this stuff is being recorded. But I think it's too important not to do, because location data is really important and people are very sensitive about it. And the worst possible thing is that someone will get it very, very wrong, and everyone will simply turn away from it.
Yeah, I think that's reasonable.
I mean, when we launched the geo feature, we added a whole other layer of permissions. Right? Someone could see your photo, but they may not be able to see the location. Right. And that's because people have lots of good reasons. And by consequence, we don't automatically import geo-exif information. And people have to turn that on. And that's been a problem for us because people don't realize that.
Yeah.
let me just say, I was probably the wrong person to start off that
So it
answer
seems.
because I think that I think that whatever data is out there is fair game for people to play with. You know, if it's Googleable, I mean, Outside In frequently gets emails from people saying, hey, could you take this article down because I don't want it, you know, it reflects me in a negative light. And we say, well, it's Googleable and it's on,
Right.
you know, 500 other sites, why should we take it down, you know?
Yeah.
And that's our policy, is if it's out on the web. But I do feel that if you're a content creation site, that you have to have very clear terms and conditions of privacy, and it's incumbent upon you to be that barrier of privacy for people.
Yeah.
So,
Dennis?
The trick is, it seems like you just want to make the stuff as opt-in as possible. You know, people get sketched out when they realize that, you know, you have more information than you should, and it's usually because you assume that they wanted them to give you your location data or their location data, and they actually didn't, you know? So that's why, like, if you look at like a lot of the spectrum of things that are doing, like, you know, mobile, social, locative stuff, like on one end you've got your Google Latitude, which you leave it on all the time and it just tracks you everywhere. And on the other end you have, like, you know, your check-in systems like Foursquare, where you have to take out the app and you have to say, oh, well, I'm at the, whatever this place is called, the Millennium Hotel, and then that's the move. That's like you're giving your opt-in. Like, you know, this is, I think people that play in this space, like, it's kind of like a big argument you have back and forth. It's like tastes great, less filling type of argument, you know? Like, no, passive tracking, no, opt-in, you know, but like, it doesn't take long to have something that's passively tracking you in your pocket to, you know, to out you in terms of like a situation you weren't supposed to be in. And I don't mean like really sketchy, like you stabbed someone, but I mean like, you know, like you tell like a white lie to get out of going to someone's birthday party, and then they check, it's like, well, actually you were in town.
You'd be amazed how many stabbing crimes we've exposed through Firewall.
Yeah. But
Hundreds.
no, it's weird. It's like, you know, I've had this argument with people, like the ability to tell white lies about location. Like, no, I wasn't actually out with that person, but I did run into them on the street, and the geodata could, you know, it prevents me from doing that type of stuff.
Yeah, so I mean, this is kind of obviously, I mean, as the service around here, I guess, that does like passive tracking, you know, people opt in again, they choose to do it. If they want to do it, they don't have to do it. There are lots of ones where you can update manually as well, but, you know, FireEagle does support people who want to build updaters that update every few minutes. I mean, I guess like my sense of this one has been that, you know, again, as Dennis says, like opt-in is a really big deal. Being clear with people about what's going on is a really big deal. Making sure that everyone knows what they're getting themselves into, and, you know, are comfortable with that. And, you know, some of the stuff we've got for third parties, like when you decide to share your location with, you know, a particular application, like Outside In, for example, you know, that you can say, I only want to do that at neighborhood level or city level, rather than, so you're not just exposing all of that location all the time. All of that stuff's been really important to us, and we give people the ability to delete all the data stored about them, and, you know, and change these preferences with any of these apps at any time. But the stuff I think that's really, that's been a surprise to me to some extent, is the longer I've been doing this, the more I've kind of gone like, you know, it's very important for us to meet people's needs and make sure that they feel, you know, the things that they worry about, you know, are alleviated, and also the things that we think it might be a risk for them are alleviated as much as possible. But those two don't really line up very well, you know, like the things people are actually scared about don't actually, from our experience, and often map terribly well onto the things that maybe they should care about, you know. So for example, we've noticed a lot of times that people care a lot about not giving up their home address. They'd like to make sure they didn't give up their home address, even though for the vast majority of people, you know, their home address is available in the phone book. You know, like it's just really publicly available. You can do one simple search. Like I actually went to a thing and someone said like, you know, I'd never want to give out my home address, and while, you know, in a Q&A session, and I literally typed in his name and brought it up on screen. You know, like, there you are, there's your address. Now, what's the problem? You know, like, I mean, if people want to find that, they can. You know, again, like, we still give people functionality to help them mitigate the things they're anxious about, but it's not necessarily the same things they should be anxious about.
I mean, in our context, it's not just knowing the home address. It's, you know, if all of the pictures, like say all of the pictures that I take of your house are publicly geotagged and public, that means the whole world knows what's in your house.
Too many jokes. I mean, I think we should probably move on from privacy because it's a kind of time sink, and we can probably, hopefully I'll get like 10-15 minutes again. So, sorry.
I was gonna say, I think, you know, my favorite thing about the FireEagle stuff is that just how easy it is to be granular about specific posts, where it's like, okay, it knows your exact location, but then you can obscure it out to like the neighborhood, the city, or the country level. And, you know, after hearing the stuff that you guys are saying, and even the stuff that, like, you know, we're going through, and if you look at like what Twitter's going to go through with the API, it's like you want to control that stuff on like a on a per post level. Like, I don't mind disclosing the specific location that I'm here down to this particular room, you know, but if I was on vacation, I might want to, you know, obscure it down to a region. But
Yeah.
like, that's a lot of settings to put in front of the user all
That's
the time. Like, with
problematic.
every check-in or with every photo or with every tweet, and it's a difficult thing to kind of get by, and I don't think anyone's really mastered it.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely fair. I mean, the one thing I'd say about this one is my kind of experience, my sense of this is, and this is probably a terrible thing to say, but my sense of this is that people's understanding of what it means to get your location and do something with it or have something done with it is Cold War dramas about being tracked and spy fiction.
Yeah, yeah.
So every time anyone like brings this up as a subject, everyone's minds switch into, you know, like it's basically like it's like red hate. It's like communist fear. You know, like you're
Yeah.
like calm the fuck down, and you know maybe we can progress. You know, and actually, but again, like what we found is that the more people use these things, the more relaxed they become about them, the more they understand the actual consequences, the actual risks, of which there are very few on the whole. So. Okay, so moving on a bit, like I suspected we'd have some fairly violent agreements there, and we kind of did, so that's good.
Not really in the end, I think.
Yeah, I think like I mean a couple of like I just want to touch on a couple of areas, and hopefully we'll then have like about 10 minutes for quick Q&A. I know it's not very much. I'm sorry. Which is basically two things, and I shall combine them together. Like there's a lot of tools and data sets and bits of stuff out there that's really useful at the moment, and there's lots of people doing really interesting work out there at the moment. So, you know, I mean, like from stuff, you know, from working out where someone is by where their mobile phone is, to new mapping technologies, to you know, Doppler, social atlas kind of things. You know, there's a lot of stuff out there that's exciting and interesting right now. I mean, I wondered if any of you like. Both in terms of technologies that are available for people here to build with, either your own stuff or other people's, and in terms of people doing interesting stuff with location, you have 6 minutes between you.
Oh, sure, I'll start. I mean, I'll come back to OpenStreetMap again, simply because they've done it. And they started out with the craziest idea possible, doing it the craziest way possible, using a freeform tag system. And yet, you know, the running joke is that the Germans have run out of places to map.
This is, by the way, for those people who don't know, OpenStreetMap is the equivalent of Wikipedia, only for maps of the entire planet. So you can go in and see vast amounts of the world. This is Santiago, which is a place I randomly chose the other day, in kind of grotesque, amazing detail. And all of this is stored as vector data behind the scenes, so they can be represented in hundreds of ways with loads of different layers of data.
Yeah, and you know, so again, it's the tool set that's been built up around that, and that's really exciting because it means that everyone else can start to play with that and see where it takes them. The tool set is, you know, the tools are built by people who are trying to solve their problem. They start with simply the raw data, and they build the thing that works for them, and then they put it out there. And then, you know, people can either follow that lead or build something entirely new. Again, we started supporting OpenStreetMap IDs as machine tags, and a friend of mine was talking about it, and he was talking about, you know, the shapefiles that typically spill into the water. And he said the interesting part is that you now have two reference points. You have the reference point of, you know, someone taking a picture of something, and then you have the thing itself. And that's territory we haven't really explored yet, but I'm pretty sure that it's exciting.
Cool. Anyone else want to talk about things, technologies, or?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of like location that's not boiled down to lat long, but it's more about like context. I'm big into the context stuff these days. Like, we're all in this room together, we're all on approximately like the same lat long, but there's some greater meaning behind that, you know. And I like how that applies to people in movie theaters and people at sports stadiums and you know, people at shows or whatever. My friend Justin Schaefer's working on this startup called Hot Potato. Anyone ever heard of that? No? Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's super cool. Where it's like context that can be tied to location. So it's like a chat room about everyone that's, you know, at this particular show in Williamsburg, or maybe everyone that's at home in their own apartments, but they're all watching like Lost together, you know. So it's like it's location not as like lat long, but it's like location tied to kind of context. It's kind of, it's out there a little bit, but like I'm kind of into tracking that stuff and making contextual stuff out.
There's a whole bunch of things around there. There's that kind of stuff. There's also place. Some of the stuff Aaron was saying earlier about space, like long lat coordinates versus ideas of place. You know, actually, I am in this neighborhood. that's more interesting than I'm at this exact point. It's comprehensible by people. There's more
Yeah,
things you
yeah.
can do with it. I'm at this venue or at this establishment, which is some of the stuff you guys have been doing.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff, like just to shill briefly for Yahoo on this one, there's a few really interesting APIs around that you should probably look at if you're interested in building things, including one, the GeoPlanet APIs, which means you can type in information and get back unique IDs to refer to neighborhoods and all this kind of stuff, which means you can build cool things around it. It's the same technology that Upcoming and Flickr use behind the scenes. And there's another one called Placemaker, which you might find interesting. You run globs of text against it, and it works out what places the text is about. So you can match all this stuff together. Go here are photos and news articles and that kind of stuff in one place. That's all quite good. John, do you want to?
Quickly,
That's Placemaker. Sorry.
I'm really excited about people that are bringing new data sets online that weren't available previously. All the city government CIOs offices that are working, and a lot of them are just, guys working ingloriously, after hours to try and do this in their city. San Francisco, Washington, D.C., Toronto's going to open up soon, Boston's going to open up soon, Vancouver. Then there's, Pachu Bay, or Patch Bay, however you say it, really cool. There's ScannerUS, is that still even around? That was bringing police scanner data online. I mean, that's just so cool. Like, there's no end to that sort of stuff. When I first bounced DIYcity off Dennis, he told me this idea about putting an accelerometer or something around every subway so it would shake and send a little signal when the subway was going by. I mean, you can hack the city to no end and just bring that data online, and that's another data point that you can access.
So a couple of examples. There's San Francisco crime spotting made by the guys at Stamen, which is fairly real time. Last few days information about what's going on archived. You can browse through and explore it. Another one.
Time by.
Sorry, don't. There's UI feature on that which I despise, which Aaron loves calling the time pie. But this is like from recovery.gov, another statement project, getting open data and making maps out of it. One thing that I think would be really good to mention, really, before we open this up to more questions, is the stuff that Mozilla have been doing with Firefox, the new geolocation API, which means that the browser itself can work out where you are from nearby Wi-Fi hotspots, and can ask you if it's okay for you to share it with the web page. That's now out in Firefox 3.5.
Is that a Skyhook thing, or is that how do they?
I think it uses Google's Wi-Fi hotspot database behind the scenes, but yeah, it's this kind of similar to the Skyhook stuff. And this is one of the things that Aaron and I went to go and see at the New York Public Library the other day, which is really amazing. They're getting 18th, 19th century maps of New York, and they're scanning them in, and they're compositing them as a layer, which you can put on like Google Earth and all these various things. Geo-rectified so they all fit in perfectly, and then they're tracing them and using other data sources to say, this kind of person lived in this kind of place, it was made of this kind of material. Really amazing for kind of getting all of the stuff that we're doing today around like opening up data, but doing that for the past as well, and doing it, one.
Sorry, were you done?
Yeah, I was done. I was completely done.
I just wanted, when these guys were talking, it reminded me of a few other things that are exciting. I mean, I've loosely been sort of wrapping everything up under this notion of proximate spaces, places that don't necessarily exist yet or are still forming. They're often unique to small groups of people, and then the other interesting part is when those sort of cross a threshold and become what a friend of mine named Sherry Wasserman described as obligated spaces. The obvious example at this point is in New York is Ground Zero. I mean, I got a map kerchief. Someone bought me a handkerchief with a map on it of Manhattan. Thought it would be a nice thing, and Ground Zero was listed as a point of interest, which is both sort of shocking and horrifying, and yet it's a little fascinating. And so in terms of people who are doing interesting stuff, every block, got around to doing the, create your own neighborhood. And there's no way to get data out yet, as best I can tell, but that's a pretty good pointer of where things are going.
Right, so we actually have slightly sprawled into the coffee break. The next session starts in 20 minutes, so if anyone wants to go and get coffee and have a break or anything, then please feel free to leave and we won't be offended. If you have questions, though, you'd like to ask myself or any of the guys on the panel now, you have that time, or like 10 minutes, 15 minutes to do so. This guy here, sorry.
Sure. So just about everything we're talking about is very much about it's in the moment. It's real-time location-based data. Not everything, but a lot of it. And to my mind, I'm curious because a lot of that data then goes away or goes somewhere. And and then you show the public library map tool, which is very, very much about history and about sort of lines and stuff. And I'm wondering what you guys are thinking about that, because you're going to obviously get gigs and probably terabytes of just stuff that could have tons of utility and be used to create all kinds of narratives. But so what happens in that direction?
Personally, I'm terrified of history clippy happening, which is one of the reasons that I don't like. I'm underwhelmed by augmented reality. One of the things I've been talking to people about in the last couple of days.
You have to explain that more.
Well, history clippy is, so you and I are walking down the street, and we're walking by
Folsom Street Fair.
Folsom Street Fair, right? And we're having a conversation, and then we have devices that are on and full of sensors, and then all of a sudden it's like, you look like you're walking by the Folsom Street Fair. Would you like me to tell you about squirrels and leather? and it's like, like that's the worst thing. Is like it's going to be the worst thing. That would be awesome. It's so annoying. So I don't know what the. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I think that would be a terrible thing for everybody. But the flip side of that is that there is all this data. I mean, I'm always really bummed out when I do a Twitter search and it only takes me back like they cut it off at 5 days now or something. And I'm like, come on, I want to go back like 6 months. See who's mentioning my name or something or whatever.
Actually, that's going to be a problem, I think. When the search stuff is retroactively done for the first time and you actually do get a chance to see what everyone said about you.
Right. Well, so this is what I was going to say, is that it's kind of like,
creation.
It's like, think about like, when was film invented? What was the year that film was invented? 1839. So it's like suddenly, it's like there's this point in history where from that point forward there's film, and we just not too long ago had that point in history where from that point forward there's geolocation and geolocated data, and it's just getting more and more rich. And so that information is always going to be somewhere. Even if we can't get to it in Twitter search, it's probably stored somewhere. It's a huge database of stuff that's going to be amazing.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that you said there that really rings a bell with me. I mean, like one of the reasons that FireEagle doesn't have history at the moment is because when we created FireEagle, there was a lot of anxiety around history, like the idea of overwriting a location record with a new one is actually one of these kind of maybe slightly overprotective privacy measures that we put in place so that there isn't a big track of everywhere you've ever been, so that so that someone doesn't end up with I got divorced because of historical access to a subpoena to FireEagle records, or I stabbed a guy, because we want them to get away with it, is what I'm saying. No, I mean, there is some, when you start talking about individuals and keeping track of where they've been, then you can get into some slightly dangerous area, particularly if people aren't, like if someone suddenly goes, actually, I don't believe you were at that thing you said you were last, 9 months ago, and they can go and check that out. That's a bit more worrying. Having said that, Flickr, you go on around taking pictures of things, you deposit them on a map when you are at that point in that moment. There is a history there of where you've been in the past. And one of the things we've always talked about is if we get, when we finally do FireEagle history properly, wouldn't it be awesome if you could, do one-click import, bring in everywhere I've been from my Geotagged Flickr photos? That would be a really cool thing to do. So, we definitely see the value and the potential for it, but, it does raise a couple of eyebrows, and you have to make sure that, you've checked, you've thought, we have a general principle of conservatism. We don't want to do anything that freaks people out. Don't do anything that makes them uncomfortable or raises risks for them. So we are on the point of over caution.
Yeah, we look at the history stuff almost like your Amazon like purchase history, or like your Netflix recommendation history.
Yeah.
Where it's like if you allow us to keep that data, and like you can blow it away at any time on Foursquare, but if you allow us to keep it, we can start recommending things for you to do. Like, oh, this is the coffee place you go to all the time. Oh, you got to try this one that's 2 blocks away. And just having that data set allows us to do all this interesting stuff. And I think there are people that get a little freaked out about it. It's like, well, you can blow it away and you can have kind of the half-baked Foursquare experience, or you can let us keep it, like trust that we'll only use it for good and we'll make something awesome for you.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a little trade-off.
Okay, so we're going to have to do questions a bit faster. I rambled a bit on that one. So, Joe?
Yeah, something that's new for me about privacy in this day and age is it's becoming as much a signal and noise problem as a scary problem. Like, it's not so much I don't want people to know where I live, it's like I don't want you to get annoyed every time I check into platform on Foursquare. It's just I know you work there, you worked there for 7 years. So do you have any kind of creative thoughts about, because it's the same thing, like it's going to have to be a mix of stuff the publisher is doing and stuff the consumer is doing to filter the right granularity and time and space for the right people. So that some people I really want to be intimately connected to, but most people I kind of just like tell me next time they're in the Bay Area or something. You know, any sort of thoughts about that? Because that's a new angle on the same problem that previously was thought of as a privacy problem, and now it's more of a usability problem.
Yeah, I think it's just putting controls in front of the user, right? So we've talked about that. Right now there's like a switch that says, you know, on Foursquare there's a switch that says, you know, tell my friends where I am, yes or no. And you know, there should be one that's like, you know, that's the one that obscures your location. It just says, hey, I'm out somewhere, I'm not going to tell you where I am. There should be one that's like, you know, this check-in is important enough that everyone needs to know. And then on top of that, I think we're going to give users the ability to ignore places. So, I mean, RGA, the interactive shop, is one of the most checked into places in New York. And, you know, it's someone's office. It's a lot of people's office. And so just being like, you know what, I don't give a shit that anyone is ever at RGA. And just being able to, you know, giving people the ability to ignore places, to maybe ignore neighborhoods, is, I think, one of the things we'll end up doing for that.
I'd be curious to know what you think about that in terms of civic data, because the notion is that as ubiquitous and pervasive computing comes online, the city's just going to be really annoying. It's like, the bus is going, the chair, you know, someone's sitting on me.
Well, I mean, this is actually kind of a misdirection.
I think we've already passed that point several times on the web without realizing it, and the filters always just step up to the job, you know, and the filters are going to have to keep stepping up to the job because we're going to have more and more data. So.
I mean, I agree with that one as well. I mean, like I turned on notifications on Foursquare on my iPhone for about an hour and a half.
It's too much.
It was too much, but you know, and we have a similar problem with Foursquare.
Quick,
quick, we have to go build something. With Fire Eagle, with the Friends on Fire stuff we have on Facebook, so people are pervasively updating the location all the time, but obviously we don't want every time someone updates the location every 5 minutes for that to be displayed on your status wall, like, Tom is still there, Tom is still there, Tom is still there. That might get kind of boring. So, you know, we had to think a lot about that one as well. I do think the filters come up to the meet the need, as John said, and I think it's true of lots of things, you know, not just location stuff. We've got one more question. It can be 1 minute, like 30-second question, and like 10 seconds for each person.
So earlier Aaron talked about, you know, the whole problem with accuracy of geolocated data, which is the same picture or the same box being showing up at 3 different locations. What are you guys doing, you know, now that you have all this usage data with me checking in the Fire Eagle, what sort of is the next step to make that data more accurate?
For Fire Eagle, there's two things that we want to do. One of them is add in actual precision data, so that when someone updates something, the client can say, I think this is precise to this level, and we can translate that into an appropriate level inside the app. And also we want to get venues into Fire Eagle as well, partly so that we're more interoperable with things like Brightkite and Foursquare. And we've got like, you know, the upcoming database, and we've got like the Yahoo local database, so that in principle you will be able to say I'm actually at this location, this venue, rather than, you know, just tracking or doing along that coordinates that you can at the moment. So that's basically what we're doing on that one. I don't know how.
Yeah, we're sucking in. You know, whenever you check in, regardless where you check in, we keep the lat long and then the accuracy. We just started doing the accuracy stuff. So we have this problem with like people cheating on Foursquare. It's like, come on. Yeah, really? I'm disappointed. Real disappointed. But it's tough because, I mean, I was just at another restaurant for lunch, and I tried to check in while I was there, and it could be because I'm indoors or the building's made of brick or iron or whatever, and the GPS won't put me there. It says I'm a couple blocks away. And so, like, the last thing you want to do is call people out for cheating when they're not cheating. But, you know, according to the phone, like the accuracy is not good enough, and it's a real problem. Like, these devices, as sexy as they are, like the GPS is just really kind of underwhelming after you spend like a couple days playing with it. And so, yeah, it's a big problem for us, and we're struggling to solve it.
You guys have got anything else? Do you want to add to that one?
I mean, for us, we have the corrections project, and then the next step to that is to error check, you know, what comes back from the robot squirrels the first time against the list of your corrections. And then obviously, you know, it's not clear that to me whether it would be worth it, but another set of error checking would be, you know, if we could resolve the tags to a place, then maybe that's an extra step. Starts to take a while.
John, anything?
I think you said it beautifully.
Okay.
Put it better.
Cool. Okay, so that's the end of this one. I know. There is a session later in the day if you're interested in maps and geo stuff more. Gary Gale's doing one. I think it's at 4. 5. And that's an overview of Fire Eagle, GeoPlanet, Placemaker APIs, and other Yahoo geotechnologies. I'd like to thank all these guys. Please build things with their stuff.